I'm Mike of Maxwell Modular, and this is the RF Nomad from Evaton Technologies. The RF Nomad is a shortwave radio receiver whose tuning is able to be controlled via control voltage. This makes for capturing great sounds that sort of exist off in the nether of radio frequencies. With the RF Nomad, you can collect sounds everywhere from shortwave radio squeals to hisses to even speech if you're in the right area. Where we're filming this demo is in the same building as several radio stations, so we're a bit limited, and later in the video we're going to take the RF Nomad out for a trip and see what we can capture in the surrounding area. To start off, I'd like to talk about the features on the panel of the RF Nomad, and at the top, we have our input for the antenna. This is just a regular RCA jack, which you can make your own cable, but the RF Nomad does come with a 10-foot cable that is very nice. I do not have one of those with me right now. Instead, I have the 25-foot cable that Russ was nice enough to make for me when I met him last year at KnobCon. This 25-foot cable is a thinner wire, but the length helps it pick up more out of the sort of radio spectrum that the RF Nomad is able to connect to. And one of the nice things having this longer antenna is I have this huge wad of cables that actually is able to be manipulated with my hand, and I can get a lot of nice sounds out of that. And we'll come back to that when we get to the sound demo portion. Next down on the RF Nomad is the RF gain. This knob kind of acts like a amplification for our reception on the radio antenna. Now, generally I like to keep this somewhere between 60 and like 90 to 100. And if I go ahead and make sure our audio gain knob is up at the bottom here and plug into our audio out jack at the very bottom, we can begin to hear some of these textures that the RF Nomad picks up. The building I'm in houses several radio stations, so we're a bit limited on the different things that we could pick up with the RF Nomad, but there's still a lot of interesting textures even in somewhere that's overcrowded with RF and noise. Going to our tuning knob, next down on the panel, we can start moving this around to see what we can capture. And the stronger I make the signal, the clearer, I guess, those different textures become. The tuning knob is the parameter of the RF Nomad that is able to be controlled via CV. Down here we have our CV in jack, and I'm going to go ahead and take an envelope that's looping off the quadra and plug it in there. The CV in takes everything from LFOs, pitch sequences, whatever have you, to audio rate signals. So you can get some really interesting, almost distortion effects if you want to run something through the RF Nomad. But for now, let's look at our looping envelope. As I raise the CV mount on the module, the next parameter down, we can raise the attenuation that's happening to the looping envelope and let it build off of the position of the tuning knob. After plugging in CV, the CV comes in and the tuning knob acts as a offset for that knob, acting as the bottom. You can get some really nice moving textures out of this RF Nomad. Just for reference, I'm going to go ahead and speed up the quadra envelope. I'm not sure if that's quite up into audio rate yet, but you can hear how that might react with some audio. Which we'll get into that when we go over just some sounds from the RF Nomad. I'm going to go ahead and go down to the last knob here, which is our audio gain, and just lower that a bit. And this is a very powerful cutoff. It will completely negate the Nomad. So it gives you a whole extra gain stage and volume control on the module before even taking it to a VCA or a mixer. I'd like to go through just some different patches with the rest of my gear and show off some ways that you can have fun with the RF Nomad. Right now I have the Evaton Technologies CLX clocking my expanded Turing machine, and that's sending CV from the sequence out into the CV in of the RF Nomad, and we're using two of the gate outputs to trigger an envelope over the RF Nomad going through a VCA. So right now you can hear some of those clicks and pops that you just kind of get out of having such a fast envelope. But you can start to hear, as I open up the envelope, some of the differences in sounds we get out of using the RF Nomad. Instead of a traditional white, red, whatever colored noise for this sort of hi-hat snare sound. And I feel like with this really snappy envelope, we're kind of more in maybe snare rim range than real hi-hat. We kind of got a clap going on as we open up the envelope, and then this is kind of what I consider open hi-hat territory. So this is a sort of like weird area of percussion that you can grab out of the RF Nomad. And having the tuning knob move in addition to the very static, or I guess rigid, pitch sequence from the Turing machine can render a lot of really nice musical changes. As I mentioned, the CV on the RF Nomad is able to go up to audio rates. So I'm actually using the RF Nomad now to process the Karp module. And as I bring this up here, you'll definitely notice. And as we play with the tuning, we can get the RF Nomad to sort of overpower what's ever going into it. We can play with the CV amount. That becomes sort of a volume for our audio input. Now that I've moved it way over here, we don't really hear the audio of the Karp anymore, but we get this almost like sidechain compression moving the tuning. But seems like I found a sweet spot here. Now, if I had two RF Nomads in the rack right now, I could actually drape my antenna of one behind the other and run audio into the second one and have the first RF Nomad actually pick up audio effectively being broadcast off of the other RF Nomad, and that gives you more of that sort of radio grainy grit. Now, for this last one, I've got a Turing machine sending a sequence into my CVP1 from low gain, and I'm summing that with the Y output from the Snazzy FX Dreamboat. And when I start turning up the RF gain and tuning, you can hear those two coming together. Very light on the Snazzy effects, just to give it this extra sort of wobble on every step of the Turing machine. Now this might be a spot where I'd take a envelope again from the Quadra and start to control the amplitude of my RF Nomad. Taking the first pulse out from the Turing machine to trigger the Quadra. I'm going to go ahead and shorten that a bit, get this set up, and pull that out. I've changed over from the summing output of the CVP to the 4 output. Where I've set it so that the Snazzy FX Y output is often higher than the Turing machine, so that every step gets that sort of glitchy gating effect almost. So, thanks again for watching. I'm Mike from Maxwell Modular, and this is the RF Nomad by Evaton Technologies.